Bethany Dawson, and welcome to My Classic Soul, the podcast dedicated to the best soul and R&B music throughout the decades. In our latest episode, soulmusic.com founder David Nathan is joined by longtime soulmusic.com colleague and music industry veteran Michael Lewis. Michael has worked with a number of major record labels including LaFace, Motown and Sony Music. Today they talk about the classic 1980 album, Give Me the Night, by the iconic George Benson. David and Michael share about how the Quincy Jones produced LP took George's global career to new heights, with hits like the memorable title cut and Love's Times Love, a dance floor classic as well as showcasing George's appeal as a multifaceted vocalist and guitarist, with tunes like Moody's Mood for Love and Off-Broadway. Without further ado, let's join David and Michael to talk George Benson.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, David. How are you?
I'm good. And you?
I'm doing well.
Excellent. Today we're going to talk about an album that I think most people who know the world of R&B, soul, and jazz would say was a seminal moment in the career of the iconic George Benson.
I would think so. Give Me the Night.
Correct. And so let's just go right into it. Let's talk about Give Me the Night. Let's start actually, since I know this is an album we both agreed to talk about, and it's an album that you specifically zeroed in on. So what is it about this album that has it be something that we really want to have a conversation about?
I think it's probably one of it's a seminal moment in George Benson's career as he evolved from primarily a jazz guitarist into more into his vocal stylings and guitar at the same time. I think working with Quincy Jones and on the production, he was able to really give him a well-rounded, full plate of musical experience with the musicians that he brought in, the other vocalists, the songwriting. It's just a complete package as far as I'm concerned.
Had you been listening to George Benson prior to this album?
Yeah, I was a big fan of George Benson for years. I mean, I heard him a lot. I grew up in a house where my father listened to a lot of jazz, so I lived in people like Wes Montgomery and George Benson were on his regular playlist from since the late '60s, early '70s, and then of course before that there was Breezing and This Masquerade, and I played the live George Benson album, which came out a couple of years before this, quite a bit also. So yeah, I was well versed in George Benson before this. I had seen him in concert several times, and during those wonderful summer concert series in Los Angeles at the outdoor amphitheaters, at the Greek Theater and Universal. So yeah, I was a big George Benson fan when this record came out already.
Well, I have to confess, this is an opportunity. I have to confess that I was not as aware of his history really until Breezing. I had seen his name. I remember he had recorded for A&M. I think I wasn't even aware that he had recorded for Columbia Records before that. So I actually didn't know much about him. And that segues into my really only George Benson story. Because since we're talking about his history as we move on to moving up to Give Me the Night. So in February of 1976, Warner Brothers Records decided to stage a show at the Beacon Theater in New York, and it was called The Orange Meets the Apple. Warner Brothers were on a mission to really establish themselves as a force in the R&B, soul fields in particular. They were known, of course, prior to that for many, many different other genres. In fact, if you think about artists that were signed to Warner Brothers and Reprise back in the 60s and early 70s, you're thinking about people from Frank Sinatra to Joni Mitchell and so on. I mean, it was just a really diverse roster, and it wasn't heavily focused in the world of black music, one could say.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a man named Tom Draper who said, he was the head of black music at Warner Brothers, and he was determined that the label would really create a presence, as I said. So some of the signings at the time were Ashford and Simpson, Dionne Warwick, who, of course, at that time had left Scepter Records, and this was a big deal for her to be on Warner Brothers. And then there were some others. Staple singers came through Curtom and Curtis Mayfield. It was a whole array, Al Jarreau, a whole array of great artists. So about 4 nights of performances at the Beacon Theatre was absolutely astonishing. I wish they had recorded it, but they didn't. As a part of that, Warner Brothers flew me from, at that time, living for 6 months in Los Angeles to New York and put everybody up at the Waldorf Astoria.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was like, wow.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, lots of interviews and so on. So my George Benson story is simply this. I'm waiting to do some interviews with some of the artists, and say, okay, it's time to do your interview with Nick and Val. Now it's time to do your interview with Curtis or whoever it was. And I'm just standing there waiting in this little kind of lobby area where all the interviews were taking place in different rooms. And this guy was just standing on the side, and he was kind of like looking very nonchalant. And so I said, hello, how are you? In my very then British accent. I said, he said, I'm fine. I said, my name's David. I said, what's your name? He said, George. I said, oh, nice to meet you, George. I said, I'm here to, do these interviews for this magazine in England called Blues. And so he said, oh, okay. And he said, oh, yeah, I just signed to Warner Brothers. And I didn't ask him his last name. I said, oh, okay. He said, yeah, I have a record coming out soon. I said, oh, well, I guess I'll be interviewing you there at some point. No idea who it was.
Wow.
Not a clue, because I don't think I'd even seen a photograph of what he looked like. And he was very amiable, very, chatty, and no thing, I'm George Benson. It was like, I said, oh, okay. And then sure enough, literally within a couple of months of that very brief conversation, here came Breezin'.
Oh, yeah.
And I looked at the cover, I'm like, oh, that was this George guy. So, and that's as much as I have as an anecdote to share with you about George Benson, other than to say that he was very, he was very kind of, what would you call that? Very cool, very, just like, hey, how are you?
Pleasant. Yeah.
Yeah. I had no idea I was talking to a future legend.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go from Breezin'. Let's talk a little bit about Breezin' and how that, in a sense, set up the albums that followed, and then moving to Give Me the Night.
All right.
So, what do you remember about Breezin'?
Of course, the title track, which was written by Bobby Womack. Funny that that was our last conversation. Rufus and Shaka doing the Bobby Womack song. But yeah, Breezin' was written by Bobby Womack. That record also had This Masquerade. Was, I think, probably the first time that people really heard George Benson sing like that. That everybody realized that this man really had some vocal chops going on. As far as I remember, that was probably his strongest vocal performance up to that point. So yeah, that kind of set the stage for what happened with when Give Me the Night came out.
It's funny. I remember when I heard This Masquerade, he reminded me vocally, and I know that at the time, people would ask him this, of Donny Hathaway. I don't know why. Just something in his voice reminded me.
Tonally, probably.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that Quincy really wanted to emphasize in producing Breezin'. I'm producing Give Me the Night, was to really, really bring George out as a vocalist. And, straight up from the first track, Love Times Love. I mean, he comes out just so easy and effortlessly the way that he delivers the lyrics, which is probably one of the sweetest love songs ever. I really love that song. And it says, talking to people. That's the song that when you mention "Give Me the Night," people say, "Oh yeah, Love Times Love." That's the song that really clicks with people. And of course, that was written by Rod Temperton, and it was during the whole time right after Off the Wall, and after they had done, Quincy had produced Rufus, and Rod Temperton wrote some of those songs on Master Jam also. So Rod was one of Quincy's most valuable players in that time period, late 70s, early 80s. He has I think several songs on this.
He does. Yeah, he does. One in particular that's a favorite of mine was actually a cover, which is a cover of a Heatwave song called Star of a Story.
Star of a Story, yeah, right. Yeah, he resurrected that for this record. George put his stamp on it. He gave you that whole atmospheric thing that similar to the Heatwave version, but of course with the Quincy Jones magic surrounding it. You can't beat that ever.
When you mentioned "Give Me the Night," it reminds me of that time period. We're talking about 1980 specifically, when the album came out. And I remember there were two tracks that I could pretty much count on hearing when I would go dancing at that time period in 1980 in New York. And actually, which was surprising in one sense, because Love Times Love, I guess it's. I think "Give Me the Night" is more of a hardcore dance track, but Love Times Love would come on, and at the same time, if I think I'm correct chronologically, it would also have been around the time of the Brothers Johnson Stomp.
Stomp, I think so. I think Stomp might have been a little bit before this, but it was around that area, around that time, yeah.
Did you ever dance to Love Times Love?
Yeah, a lot.
How about "Give Me the Night"?
To this day, I play this record a lot.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. It's in constant rotation right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the other songs on there. We've mentioned Patty Austin, and I think the track that for me on this album where she's most obviously prominent is Moody's Mood for Love.
For Love, yeah.
Yeah. I was familiar with the song really only because of the Aretha Franklin version of it, also produced by Quincy Jones on Hey Now Hey album.
Right.
In 1972, but I was not really familiar with the song before that. Did you know Moody's Mood for Love before?
I did.
I assume you did know in your background. Yes.
Well, because my mother used to always sing it.
Really?
Yes, she did.
Okay.
Yeah, she would always sing that song. I never knew what she was talking about, but I just remember her. She would always sing that. So yeah, I was familiar with that for sure.
Well, let me ask you a question. You don't have to answer. Was she singing it to your dad?
She would just sing it,
Okay.
It was just a favorite song of hers, It was just something that she was always singing it,
Okay. I'm just thinking of, because the song is about, I'm in the mood for love, kind of. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about Patty Austin, and her role in that. Again, were you familiar with Patty Austin's voice prior to that? Had you heard any of her records?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had her CTI records that were a few years before this, right? Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Starting about 1976, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I was a big Patty Austin fan.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because at some point George Benson and Patty Austin were label mates. but I don't think at the same time as CTI. In fact, he just left CTI, but when he joined Warner Brothers, and she was at CTI at the time.
And of course, any Quincy Jones production is liable to have Patty Austin attached to it. Also.
Yes.
They're I call them his most valuable players. That Greg Fillinganes on keyboards, Paulino Da Costa on percussion. On this record, and in that whole period, he was using John Robinson, the Rufus's drummer, on his recordings. And people that Rod Temperton, of course, is a songwriter.
Yes.
Let's pause for a quick break. Then we'll return to David Nathan and Michael Lewis as they continue to discuss Give Me the Night, the classic 1980 album by George Benson.
Out now, saxophonist Jermaine Lockhart's new single, Perfect Timing. Executive produced by George Benson and produced by Preston Glass, Perfect Timing is a current UK soul music radio chart hit, the follow-up to Back to the Sunshine, Jermaine's first UK soul music top 20 single. Check out Jermaine Lockhart's new single, Perfect Timing, out now on Soul Music Records, available on all digital platforms.
And also on this record, there are a couple of songs by the Brazilian guitarist, composer, singer Ivan Lins. Love Dance.
Yes.
And also Dinner, that instrumental, that wonderful instrumental that's on here. That's an Ivan Lins song. He also wrote the song The Island, which Patty recorded on
Correct.
her Quest album.
On a Quest, correct. Yeah. Well, the thing that's interesting too is I was looking at some information related to this whole album and George Benson's career, and I don't know if you're aware, but it was absolutely his biggest. Give Me the Night was his biggest pop hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Yeah. And I think it exposed him, as you said. I think the intention was to expose him to a much wider audience. And I think that I can remember at the time there was a little bit of I don't say backlash, but more like from jazz purists who followed George's career as a guitarist. And then, of course, with Breezin, hearing him as a vocalist also. But I think there was I can remember there was some, feeling that he had really deserted his jazz roots, and he was now he'd gone mainstream. Right.
But most musicians who have pop R&B hits like that suffer that same fate. I mean, the people said the same thing about Al Jarreau, toward the 80s when his music started being more mainstream. Remember, people felt like he had
sold out.
Well,
it's so funny when you talk to people like who are accused of selling out, meaning selling out from their roots, their musical roots, so to speak. A couple of people I remember when I've said that to, they say, "Well, that's fine as long as I'm selling out concerts."
Well, there you go.
So let's talk some more about the specific tracks. We've talked a little bit about Love Times Love, and we've talked a little bit about Give Me the Night, and also, Moody's Mood for Love. Touched upon the Star of a Story, and you mentioned the instrumental Denora. Some other songs on the album you'd like to focus on?
That's most of them. The instrumental Off Broadway, which is actually written by Rod Temperton, which sounds like that's George is probably his guitar forte on the record is on that song, which an interesting play on Broadway. This is off Broadway, So he really gets to stretch out on that. Also, another one of those players, most valuable players that Quincy uses is Jerry Hay, who does the horn arrangements. He came from Seawind, and he's on almost every Quincy recording in the 70s and 80s, late 70s and 80s, as a horn arrangement. So those horn arrangements you hear on Michael Jackson, on Rufus Master Jam, and all through this record are just he's amazing. He's amazing, a horn arranger. Love Dance, the Yvonne Lynn song. It has lyrics by I think Alan and Marilyn Bergman, if I'm not mistaken.
Due to the lovely aspects of technology that we have, I can actually confirm that for you right now. Let me see here. Actually written by Yvonne Lynn's Paul Williams.
Paul Williams, yeah. Okay.
And someone called Vitor Martins, who I assume is probably Brazilian. Yeah,
that's his usual. They wrote the lyrics. I mean, the music, and Paul Williams does the lyrics. Oh, I think the Bergmans, did. I'm thinking about the Patty Austin song, "The Island." They did the lyrics on that one.
Right. An interesting point of reference, given our previous session about Rufus. Are you aware that Hawk Walensky wrote Midnight Love Affair?
Midnight Love Affair, yes, absolutely. Yeah, that guy, I'm telling you, that guy's a ridiculous songwriter. He's so many great songs along the way that other people recorded beyond Rufus, So, I love to see him in the mix also.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I realized as I was listening back to the album myself is that there is a real consistency. You can tell that this was not let's do a track here, let's do a track there. It's like created as an album. Mm-hmm. And I think that as you may be aware, prior in years previous. In previous years, that's a better way of saying it, a lot of times people would not actually go in to make an album. They would just cut tracks and then they would end up with an album. And I think for this one, you can actually hear concerted, working together to create a piece of work. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing. And the second thing that I think that I'm really aware of is how Quincy was like the go-to guy. At that point, I mean, he was definitely coming off the wall. Brothers Johnson. I mean, it's kind of like boom, 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 boom in a row. I mean, just no stopping him.
Right. And with this being the first release on his label, so to speak, this was Quincy's label, Quest. Mm-hmm. And so of course he's going to pull out all the stops to make sure that this is the strongest production that he can put out there. It has to have that big impact, and they did it. It gets no better than this.
Yeah. It's interesting too, Michael, is that I think there's certain producers who I think of as being like the chef, like they're the person that a producer is someone who puts all the ingredients together. There are some producers, as we know, who are also songwriters in their own right. I think of people like Tom Bell, Philadelphia, and Gamble and Huff, who, were producers as well as being songwriters. Mm-hmm. And with Quincy Jones, it's very much like he's the master chef. He puts all the ingredients together, helps create the song selection. He's like the casting guy for the background singers, and putting all the things in the mix that creates this great piece of work.
Yeah, he picks the best people for the job, or there's the vocal arrangers. I think probably a lot of the vocal arrangements was done by Rod Temperton, because that was one of his forte also, besides songwriting.
Yes.
again, Lee Ritenour and Paulino DaCosta and people like that. Richard T is on this record. Herbie Hancock.
Yeah, I was going to say, we can't forget Herbie Hancock.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, the quality of the musicians cannot be beat on this recording, and it's all pulled together in the strongest package.
Yeah. And, in context, it turned out to be George Benson's biggest best-selling, after Breezin', it's actually, I believe, his best-selling album ever in his whole career. And, led to his first international touring. He did tour a little bit, I think, in 1977. He came to Britain, I know, and did some shows there. But that was the first time he had been in Britain for about 4 years. And when he was there previously, he had played at Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club. So he was already, by 77, expanding his international audience. And then, of course, here came Give Me the Night, just kind of took it all the way out. George Benson, for many years has been an international major performer and, recording artist. And I don't know that was necessarily predictable for someone who started out essentially as a jazz musician. I'm trying to think of other people from that era who really took it all that way. Even I think it was as recently as last year, George Benson performed at the Royal Albert Hall, I think it was, here in Britain. Mm-hmm. It sells out every time he's selling out the shows. Selling out the music. And so that's really, it's just an interesting thing to see how his career has developed to the point that he basically is a household name for many, many people.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And across generations also, because like I said, my father listened to George Benson. And when I was, knee-high to a chicken.
I knew you were going to say that. Knee-high to a what?
Knee-high to a chicken.
I knew you were going to say chicken. Okay. I thought you were going to say knee-high to a grasshopper, but oh well.
No, that's Stevie's lyric, and I was
just a couple other things. Around that time period, did you get a chance to see George Benson in concert?
I did. Several times. Most memorably was the show that he did at Universal with Minnie Riperton opening.
Oh, can you tell us more about that?
Oh man, it was just the most wondrous night ever. And then for them to come out, they did a couple of duets during the show. She opened the show, of course, and then he brought her back to do. They did Misty.
Wow.
It was just.
You're talking about the standard Misty.
The standard Misty, yeah.
Wow. That would have been worth. Oh, man. That would have been worth flying to. Where were you in LA at the time?
Universal Amphitheater.
Yeah.
That's when it was outdoors before they covered it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would have been worth flying to LA to see.
Yeah. That was a great. That was my most memorable show.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think anything else that we should say about this album other than it is a classic.
No, if you don't have it.
We used to say, Michael, as you know, having worked in record shops like I did many years ago, my record shop days were a little bit before yours, but nonetheless, we used to say, go to your local record shop and pick up a copy of George Benson, Give Me the Night. And now we say, go to Spotify and stream, or go to Spotify and download, or go to wherever. And but that is the beauty of modern. I'm being a little silly about it, but the beauty of modern technology allows me and you and whoever to buck along the street or sit at home and listen to this music at literally at the click of a switch. Yeah,
I had to run errands today, so I just had it playing in the car while I was doing what I had to do. And,
Good. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Michael. Thanks for choosing this album. Last one we did, as we know, was the Stomping at the Savoy, and I guess we're on a roll here, right?
Yeah, I like this. I like this concept.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to see what we can come up with next, right?
Great.
All right. Well, good talking to you, Michael, and thank you for your observations and comments about this great album. Love times love. That's right.
There you go. All right, man.
See ya.
See you later.
Thanks, David and Michael. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform, and visit us for breaking news and daily updates about your favourite soul and R&B artists over at soulmusic.com. I'm Bethany Dawson. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on My Classic Soul.